Right, I can see that we're live. So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for the, I've got quite a bit to read out right at the very beginning in the current situation. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Due to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the provision set out in the local authorities and police and crime panels, coronavirus, flexibility of local authority and police and crime panel meetings, England and Wales Regulations 2020, and with Cambridgeshire County Council's own virtual meeting protocol. A decision summary and minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meeting page of the Council website. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the committee to keep their video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting, but to keep their microphone muted except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function on the right-hand side of their screen. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question, and then mute it again to follow the officer to respond. There will be no points of order or personal explanation. As with all new arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there is always a risk that we may run into technical problems, for which I would ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, I will have to declare an adjournment whilst the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. Please also note that to facilitate discussion, I intend to waive the committee procedure rule limiting members' contributions to 5 minutes. I also propose to allow members to speak more than once on each item if that is appropriate. However, please make sure that your contributions remain as concise and to the point as possible. I would remind members and officers that all virtual meetings are recorded. Before we start, I would also like to highlight that the confidential item on the library service acquisition, item 12, has been withdrawn and is now scheduled to be presented on the June meeting. So with that, I would just like to ask one question. Is everybody happy with the raised hand function and knows how that to work from Tuesday? I'm assuming that from the full council meeting, everybody's comfortable with the raised hand situation. Thank you. I'll take that as a yes. Right. Members, I will begin by calling the names of all members of the committee to establish your presence. Please, could you unmute, say present, and then mute again? What fun. Right, so we're going to start. Councillor Ian Bates.
Present.
Councillor Chris Bowden.
Present.
Councillor John Gowing.
Present.
Councillor David Jenkins.
I'm here.
Councillor Linda Jones.
Present.
Councillor Peter Mcdonald.
Present.
Councillor Terry Rogers.
Present.
Councillor Mike Shellings.
Present.
Councillor Tim Wotherspoon.
Present.
And myself, Councillor Goldsack. I would like to say how proud I am to now be the chair of this committee, but I would also like to say thank you to Councillors Schumann and Hay for all the work that they've put in. Could I also extend a special welcome to Councillors Bowden and McDonald, who have joined us on this committee. You are most welcome. So with that, we're going to move on to, I think I pass over to you, Dawn, don't I, for the confirmation?
Yes, briefly, this is just to confirm that at Tuesday's full council meeting, Councillor Goldsack was appointed as chairman of this committee and Councillor Chris Bowden as vice chairman.
Thank you, Dawn. Then we'll move on to item 2, apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Any apologies of absence?
No apologies, Chairman.
Okay, and now for all members, any declarations of interest? We'll take that as a no. There's no.
No, I raise my blue hand.
I apologise, Councillor Jenkins. David, yeah, what?
I'm a trustee at the Morris Education Trust, so should not participate in the item related to Comerton Village College and IVC. And I'll take advice as to whether or not I should switch my screen off for the duration.
Thanks for that, David. Dawn, what's your thoughts on that?
I think there's no problem. It's a public meeting, but if you want to, if Councillor Jenkins would rather not participate in this item, but he could certainly observe it.
Okay, thank you, John.
Thanks for that then. Thank you very much. Okay, right. Moving on to item 3 then, public minutes of the meeting of the 24th of April 2020. We are asked to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 24th of April as a correct record. Can I ask any member who does not agree with this proposal to click their raised hand function on so that we can see any dissension? Okay, thank you for that. I can see no objections to the proposal to approve the minutes as a correct record, so I will take that as carried. Thank you very much. On the basis that the committee members are happy to approve the minutes as written, subject to that, again, I would ask anyone who objects to raised hand function. On the basis that the recommendation to approve the minutes is carried, I will sign a hard copy when we return to the office. I'm sure you will instruct me on that, Dawn, when we get further down the line. Okay, we're moving on to item 3B now, which is the action log. An updated action log was included in the published papers for the meeting. Officers, do you have anything to add to the action log?
Yes, John McMillan speaking. On the action log number 183, in the final column, it should say completed. The football club are not moving, so there's nothing more we can do.
Okay, is everybody okay? Moving on to the action log itself then. Thanks for that, John. Has anybody got the, we've got some questions raised. Now they come up in order and I will take them in the order that they come up. So first on the list is David Jenkins.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The minutes of the 24th of September regarding resolution for this land AGM was mentioned at full council earlier this week, and I confess to forgetting what this was all about. So 3 questions, please. What is the issue here? Why are we waiting so long? And why isn't there a due date in the right-hand column?
Okay. Well, I can give a bit of an update on that in as much as there has been, and I was informed this morning, there has been an update on this. But if we go into discussing it now, then we will have to go into a confidential session because it was a confidential matter. But what I can say to you is that this will be sent out to you as a confidential note directly after this meeting, if everybody's happy with that.
Will that mean this item is now closed?
It won't mean it's closed. It will give you an update on exactly where we're at with it, with a view to when there should be a time date for a closure.
Why is it confidential? Who's made that decision?
I understand it was confidential because when you guys discussed it, you did so under a confidential matter, which makes this confidential.
Can we have an up-to-date reading on that, please?
Chairman, if I may interject, this is the advice of the monitoring officer. So the legal advice which has been given to the committee, as you rightly say, was done as a confidential item, and the subsequent legal advice it is as such. So this is the advice of the monitoring officer, and the monitoring officer will be writing via yourself, Chairman, to all committee members, as you say, after this meeting.
So this means we are still going to be unable to have an active councillor representative on the board of this land for the foreseeable future.
I didn't quite say that, Chairman. I think you'll after you receive the advice, obviously that matter will then be an issue for the committee to consider in light of the advice that's given. I'm trying not to be too specific because it is a confidential item, Chairman.
I don't wish to put you on the spot, Chris, at all, but this is carried on for a long time and we do need to bottom it, and there are rumblings of discontent amongst the press already about this.
I do agree with that, Councillor Jenkins. I do agree. When you look coming into fresh and you're reading up about this, there are obvious reasons for this. I'm quite assured that the monitoring officer update that's coming out today is not kicking it down the road a little bit further and is actually moving things to where we need to go. So I think what I'd like to do is say that if we can accept that and not go into the confidential session now, then we can move forward from there. I don't really know any other alternative at this moment in time. Is that fair, Chris?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you.
So I presume it will be an agenda item for the next meeting of this committee.
Sorry, David, I missed that. Just say that once more time.
So I presume it's going to be an agenda item for the next meeting of this committee.
I would presume so as well. It's not down to be one, but certainly if it's coming out as a confidential notice after this one, I can't see any reason why it shouldn't be one that we should be discussing.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I may interject, I'm concerned as a matter of principle that if we have this sort of situation happening again, that there is no possibility of me being able to ask a question on the advice on the note that is then going to be circulated. And if the matter's urgent, then I think we're not being democratic.
So if I can just play that back for understanding, Councillor Shellens, what you're saying is the fact that there's going to be a confidential note coming out then doesn't allow open debate on that in this forum.
Absolutely correct, Chairman.
Okay.
I've made myself clear for once.
I think well, I don't disagree with what you're saying, Mike, and I would take a lead from the officers here that do you believe that this should be on the next agenda? And any reason why it shouldn't be?
Chairman, I'm happy for the substance of the briefing note which you received to be the subject of a confidential item at the next meeting.
Okay, does that answer your question, Mike?
Chairman, I think I'm making a slightly different point, which is one of principle, which is such an arrangement against future occurrences is unsatisfactory. And I would ask the officers to look at how we might deal with that.
Okay, yeah, okay. Well, at this stage, all I can do is note that point, but I think it's a fair one, and that's something that we can have a look at, officers moving forward, yeah?
Claire, Chairman, if I just may slightly interject, and I'm not trying to challenge. Just gone on to mute, so apologies. But we do need to be clear that the shareholder is represented by two representatives on the board of the committee, irrespective of the fact that the nominated representative from this committee isn't currently sitting on that board. The council as shareholder is fully represented, and the issues and performance of the company are reported back to this committee. So in terms of emergency decisions, I mean, obviously you make your own judgment of whether you think this is an emergency or not, but we will bring back that report as I've said to the next committee in order for you to make a judgment on the next steps.
Okay, well, with that response from Chris then, and Mike, and I read David, who actually originally asked the question, are you content for where we're at this moment in time, subject to this email coming out today?
Can I just make the two observations? Chris is correct. We do have, the county council has two other nominated non-execs, but with due respect to those people, we never get a report back from them to this committee as to what happened at the board meetings they went to. Second point is, of course, and this is what's important about what Mike is saying, had the confidential response to this action been released before this meeting, then we could have actually gone into confidential session today to discuss it. And so we've suffered a 1 month delay as a result of a couple of hours timing issue.
Yeah, I understand that. What I can say is the note that I received on this was at 6:19 yesterday evening, which didn't leave a lot of time to do anything subject to this meeting. So I do understand that. So Chris, just to be absolutely clear on this, we're going to bring the email that's coming out later today from the monitoring officer to a confidential item in the agenda next month. But there's no reason why any of the members of this committee can't speak to you and other officers on that matter between now and then.
That is absolutely correct, Chairman. And just for point of clarification, any member of the shareholder committee can sit on the board as an observer at any point in time. There is no restriction on that. Could I also say that in response to Councillor Jenkins' challenge. The committee do get performance meetings with the board representatives, not just the representatives of the shareholder, on a quarterly basis. If this committee want monthly, well, the board don't meet monthly, but if they want regular updates from the board activities, they only have to ask. We were working on the basis that the feedback from the shareholder meetings that you have was sufficient. But if that's not, I'm more than happy to, myself or Steve Cox is more than happy to prepare a report.
Thank you, Chris. Can we have a published list of when the board meetings are taking place so that we may then exercise our right to observe them?
Of course, Chairman.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman. This is going on and on. We've received, I think, satisfactory answers from the officers on this matter, and we will receive the confidential item later from our monitor officer. Can we move on, please?
Well, thank you, Councillor Bates and Councillor Jenkins and Councillor Shellens. From the responses you got now, are you happy that we move on to the next question?
Fine.
Thank you very much. Chris, I guess you've got your raised hand there in relation to what we've just discussed.
It was, Chairman, yes, thank you.
Okay, so next on the list, I've got Councillor Jones.
Thank you. And I have to say that my question was exactly the same as Councillor Jenkins' question. And I want to make just two comments, one of which is about time frame, because it has been a shockingly long time this has taken to be sorted out, and that mustn't happen again. And the second issue is that a lot of the concern and potential angst about this could be avoided if we had a schedule, which actually Councillor Schumann said we would get, for this land meetings. And that's been one of the problems, that this land proposes a meeting and then something happens and we shift it. And it's the lack of a schedule, the lack of clarity about many issues, which then feeds a notion of secrecy and, you know, potentially down the line of conspiracy, which is inappropriate for this council. So we need to be kind of careful about how we handle these issues. That's all I want to add.
Okay, I note that, Linda, and I think from the comments of Chris earlier, then that list is going to be provided for when those meetings are, to allow that opportunity to be involved. Okay, right, well, we'll move on then. Is there any other points on the action log, moving through them, that people want to raise? Tony, you've got your hand raised. Tony Cooper. Tony?
He's on mute.
Apologies, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Tony. Please go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you. Firstly, just a brief introduction as the newly appointed head of property at the council. On item 293, there was a request by the committee for a service improvement plan to be brought in June. I just request a deferral on that. Firstly, because I'm new in post and obviously getting to know the council. Secondly, you have a focus on COVID at the moment, and thirdly, as you will be aware, there's some audit reports which may due to be published over the coming months and therefore may impact on the department. So I just request the committee a deferral of that plan until such time as those matters are resolved.
I'm not strictly opposed to deferrals, but as mentioned in the previous item, I do quite like to see dates so that we know when we're looking at. So have you got an idea on that one, please?
At the moment, I would suggest September. That will give us time to digest the audit reports on the base, my understanding that they may be published in July.
Okay, well, I must confess, as I didn't want to say this morning, but I must confess I'm not aware of the implications of that being delayed till September. So if I could defer to any other members for any comments on that, please. I'm not seeing any dissension. Cheryl, sorry, I'll come to Cheryl in a minute. I'm assuming that's not on this matter. Okay, all right. So we'll agree to that then, and we'll see that if we can make those changes onto the September committee, please. Cheryl, I see you've got your hand raised.
Yes, it's regarding Action 292. It says it's not yet been completed. It has been completed, but not in the way the action is described. So we have sent out 2 additional new quarterly monitoring reports. So you should have received that as committee. this week, the latest quarterly monitoring report, and we provide the most up-to-date information we can in those meetings. So I think this is completed.
Okay, all right. Well, again, if we can get that adjusted accordingly. So I'm going to move forward. Is there anything else on the action log that anybody's got a point with? Cheryl, could you kindly lower your blue hand if you've finished? So where you had raised hand, you should also have a thank you. That's perfect. Okay, thank you then. We're going to move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is petitions and public questions. Members, we have received one question from the member of the public, Mr. Richard Potter. This will now be read out by our Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you, Chairman. From Mr. Richard Potter on behalf of the Cambridge Green Party. The County Council has discussed climate change and environment strategy on 19th of May. This strategy, table 2 in the actual strategy, puts forward a number of targets. How will the committee plan and monitor its contributions to these? Will the committee examine links with fossil fuel companies and how it will in the future? How will the committee show leadership and influence across Cambridgeshire in tackling climate change?
Okay, thank you for that, Dawn. A response will be sent to Mr. Potter within 10 working days of the committee in accordance with sections 4.4, paragraph 9.2 of the Council's Constitution, and the response will also be appended to the published minutes. Okay, we're going to move on to key decisions now. Item 5.
Chair.
I apologise again. I'm trying to look at 3 screens, 2 screens and a bit of paper. Mr.
You're doing very well. All right, so far. Well done, Mark. Just a question. That public question was not flagged on the website. Normally we have the public questions listed so that we know that they're coming as part of the agenda.
My apologies, Chairman. That's entirely my fault. I'll add that to the website at the conclusion of the meeting.
Okay, well, I think we can accept the apology on that one, Dawn, and make sure that we're on that. But Councillor Jenkins, that's a really good point. Okay, moving on to item 5, the East Cambridgeshire Adult Social Care Service Development. Can I invite Amanda Roach, Commissioner Learning Disabilities and Autism, to introduce the report?
Morning, everyone. So the ask today is to consider the use of the Burwell Housing Department and Fire Station for the development of a specialist supported living service within Cambridgeshire. So to just set the scene, in response to Winterbourne View, which I'm sure you'll all be aware of, the Transforming Care Agenda was introduced, and local authorities were charged with developing specialist services locally to enable bringing service users who have been placed out of county back into county, and to have appropriate services for adults with learning disabilities and or autism within their county offer. So this development is part of a wider strategy to create those services within the county boundaries. So the proposal is that we're going to use NHSE capital money. So the NHSE has put aside a large pot of money for this purpose to contribute to developing these specialist services. Alongside that, use capital money from Cambridgeshire County Council to actually build this service. And the proposal is we use the County Council land, so the Burwell Highways Department. To date, the Adults Committee has agreed as a key decision the development of the service. Capital Board has agreed the 1 million capital to be used as part of this development, and NHSE, we have an agreement in principle for £2 million. We can't actually apply for the capital from NHSE until we have a postcode, hence the agreement in principle. So along with strategic assets and with our procurement team, we've made several investigations into how we can deliver a service in county. We're talking about adults who have very specific environmental needs. So we've looked at the current provision within county. We felt we didn't have anything that was that could be developed to be suitable. for a variety of reasons. There may be people that are already living there, or the expense of developing the service further would be prohibitive. I went out to the market to see if there was any appetite for anyone to build a service within county. The responses that came back were actually the cost of land and developing within Cambridgeshire were prohibitive to this. I looked with the strategic assets team for land available within the wider market, and again there wasn't anything that we found that was suitable. We then went on to look at buildings that were owned within the county, and then further onto land that was owned within the county. We identified 2 sites, one being Burwell and the other being Swaff and Bolbec. I have to just at this point say there were some very specific environmental needs that played out in terms of one of the people that we were going to introduce back into this, or propose to introduce back into this service. This particular person has very strong links with East Cambridgeshire, which is why we kind of looked within East Cambs district for the available land and or property. This person's needs were such that there was a need to be on the outskirts of a conurbation rather than within a community. They needed to be in a private space, so not overlooked by other people, and in a kind of a low sensory environment. So they were the kind of prerequisites that we applied when we were looking for land or buildings. So the feasibility study was carried out by Faithful and Gould, looking at the merits of both sites. It sat favourably with the Burwell site. So the Burwell site was felt to meet all the environmental and the environmental requirements that were in the kind of the accommodation report around this one particular person, and thinking wider about the people we would support to be in this service who would have incredibly complex needs. It met the requirements for that kind of cohort of people. And additionally, the size of Burwell was lends itself to social engagement and community inclusion far more. There's more amenities in the village. The transport links are much better. We have 2 social enterprises within easy reach of this plot, who are well-established social enterprises and who have the respect and the support of the community. So we all feel there are already kind of links within that community. So the plan would be for the county council to manage the build of the accommodation. And then we would lease the building to a registered housing provider, who in turn would provide tenancies for each individual living in the service, and would provide the housing management support that people would need. We would then look to our learning disability specialist frameworks to provide the support. So we have a complex learning disability supported living framework in place, where we have providers of support who were proven to be experts and experienced in delivering this kind of complex support that we'd require. So the cost of the build would be, it was estimated through the feasibility study to be around about £3 million and would take 2 years. You would have had attached to your to my paper the timeline that was produced through the feasibility study. And also attached was the feedback from East Cambs District Council in terms of the planning. So strategic assets had a pre-app planning in place, and the feedback of that planning app was, or pre-planning app was within the report as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Amanda. Just before I take questions, and I see some blue hands up, can I just point out, I think Councillor Gowing left us for a while on a computer crash, and I think he's now back with us, but I can't see Councillor Bates online. Have we lost Councillor Bates? Is James online still as well?
My colleague Dan's actually taken over hosting the meeting, and we have lost Councillor Bates, but Dan's working on that at the moment.
Okay, all right, fine. Okay, well, we'll continue as was then. Right, well, the first blue hand is Mike Shellens.
Thank you, Chair. To start with a point of agreement, I absolutely agree with the principle of bringing people home. And the closer they are to their families and friends, the better. And I'd much rather spend our money within our county rather than in somebody else's county. But what rather puzzled me or concerned me was the very detailed specification required to meet the needs of a particular individual. And I just wonder whether we are at risk of designing something for an individual which is no longer appropriate for other members who may come subsequently, and whether we would do better to make specific arrangements for that individual elsewhere so that we could have a more generic building. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Amanda, would you like to respond to that?
Okay, so there were some very individual requirements for that individual, for that person. However, a lot of those requirements are replicated in the cohort we're talking about. So what we're proposing is they are individual units, and each unit will reflect the needs of the person that lives there. And then the wider environmental requirements, i.e. kind of being close to a community, but not too close to a community, so their privacy is maintained. We don't have issues around potential noise pollution. Those requirements are replicated in a lot of this cohort. And I think I absolutely take your point that it feels as if we are designing this around one person, but actually that person's needs are kind of quite reflective of other people's needs that would move here.
Okay, thanks for that, Amanda. Thanks, Councillor Shellens. Linda Jones.
Thank you. Again, I'm very supportive of this in principle. I was hoping that there would be, we did discuss this at the Leeds meeting, and I was hoping there would be more discussion of risk and what the maximum exposure of the council might be in the situation where, for example, I mean, it seems likely that the planning would not be an issue, but there is an issue about soft market testing for a registered housing provider, and that hasn't been undertaken. So it would have been useful, I think, in this paper to have had a wider discussion of risk. The other comment I'd make is that I don't think, although, as Amanda has just said, I don't think, although the needs of a particular individual were very specific, that the accommodation is being designed for a specific individual. I think it's being designed to accommodate a range of individuals, which is absolutely what it should be. And the third comment I'd make is that one of the concerns I had about this was that it was potentially isolated from the community, but I've been reassured, in particular by Councillor Schumann, that this is on the edge of a community that will be supportive and has other similar social enterprises with which it can connect. So I think this is a good location, but I do think that we ought to be aware as a Commercial Investment Committee a little bit more about the potential exposure and risk there is. And we've got actually 3 bullet points under 2.4, and that's about it.
Okay, if I can just add a little bit to that before we go back on the risk front. In terms of your point on the location, Linda, it's an area I personally know very well. And when I saw this come through, because I'm also on Adults Committee, when I saw it there, I thought straight away, wow, you're 150 yards from open countryside in one direction. You're about 100 yards from a wonderful cricket pitch and lovely area on the edge of the village going in the other direction. And I understand there's an issue potentially with noise and things from some of our residents and control, and it's far enough away from any other development while still being locally. So I was very pleased with the location once I realised that, Linda, just to give you a little bit more local flavour.
Sorry, can I just come back on that? Because I did say I was reassured by the councillor by the comment that Councillor Schumann had made earlier. So it wasn't something I was concerned about. I was flagging it because the public are listening in, and need to be kind of clear that this is an appropriate site. That's what I was trying to flag.
I misheard you. I do apologise. But with regard to the risk, then could we come back on that one, please?
So I've worked very closely with NHSE, with the housing advisor for this region, in terms of learning in other local authorities have gone down this route and taken this route to develop services. And in terms of engaging housing providers, they've given a lot of indication in terms of how we ensure that we're using the right housing provider, that we go through a tender exercise almost, and we're really clear about our requirements, and that they are proven and experienced in delivering support, housing management support to this cohort of people. It's a lot of our accommodation in county and nationwide is provided for adults with learning disability and autism, is provided through our registered providers market, so our registered social landlord market. So they are proven in their experience of delivering support to people with complex needs. I take your point, we haven't done any soft market testing. It's been, I suppose this is, it feels like we're trailblazing in Cambridgeshire building this sort of service, so we're kind of feeling our way as we go along. And I've been led by the NHSE housing advisor in terms of what steps I take and in which order. And governance was the first step. And it is absolutely something we will do now is start talking to our housing partners. We have collaborated with them in terms of talking to them about them having the capital and building the service. But as I said, people felt that the cost of land and building in Cambridgeshire was prohibitive to them putting the capital in place in order for that to happen. So as part of that soft market testing, some of the people that came back to me were housing partners.
Okay, Linda, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I think it would be useful to have a more comprehensive risk analysis than 3 bullet points. I also think it would be kind of quite useful to understand something. I mean, I think you're absolutely spot on in terms of it both being good practice and about the sort of repatriation of out of county people. I think both of those things are really important. Going forward, it will be useful to understand the potential savings that the county might make as well. So I think there are a number of issues to do with commercial investment, to do with finance, that it would be good to have undertaken a little more rigorously, and perhaps to do so now.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next raised hand then. Thanks for that, Councillor Jones. It's Councillor Rogers, Terry.
Thank you, Chair. Just demuting. It's a paper that's in principle, and I endorse the argument as it's presented. I was slightly worried about the location, as Linda was, especially when I read a statement within the paper that said it was not suitable for residential use on grounds of unacceptable living environment and in terms of noise and pollution. However, I have been reassured by Councillor Schumann and others that in fact it is a good site. So I'm quite content on that. However, what does concern me, although this paper is in principle, the actual financial side of it is somewhat lacking. I know we're talking about £3 million initial outlay, but there's no mention of what annual costs will be thereafter. And when I read in the paper that it depends on estimated and anticipated, then that leaves me with some concern. What I'm saying is, when I get the next paper, I would like to see a more detailed analysis of what the financial costs will be. Because if I look at the actual figures you've presented in this paper, you say at one stage there's a saving of £200,000 per annum. And then later on you say there's a saving of £50,000 per person. And I presume with 6 units, that means 6 people, which would suggest then a saving of £300,000 per annum. I know it's a small figure, but it's incorrect. So could I ask in future for the next paper, you have a little bit more detail on finance, please?
I take it that's noted, Amanda, yes?
Yes, noted. Sorry, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, thanks for that, Terry. Next on the list is Councillor Jenkins. David?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Look, guys, this is a decision for us as to whether or not to release this land. With due respect to my colleagues, it's not our job to second guess adult committee's decision already to invest in this sort of facility. I share the concern that's been expressed a little bit that we might be biasing the decision because of short-term need, and I'll accept that they are representative of long-term. The paper talks about supported living building to serve East Cambs. Do we mean to serve East Cambs, or do we mean in East Cambs to support Cambridgeshire? Because if it's the former, does that mean that it's the first of many? Or if it's the latter, why then did we focus our search only on East Cambs? And was it just because of short-term need?
Amanda, can you come back on that?
So in terms of focusing the need on East Cambridgeshire, we were led because we have one person that we know wants to come back and we need to bring back into Cambridgeshire, and they have a link with East Cambridgeshire. So it could have been anywhere in the county, but we chose to look in that area to kind of support her to maintain her links with her local community. This is seen as a county-wide service, though. It will be to support residents of Cambridgeshire to live in Cambridgeshire. So, as I said, we've got a number of people that are out of county. We've got this one particular person who has the links with East Cambridgeshire. We have another person who's currently in Northamptonshire, who has no particular links with any district within Cambridgeshire. The service is also intended to meet the needs of younger people who are out of county in residential education placements, for example. And again, they will come back to Cambridgeshire. So it is absolutely seen as a county-wide service. As I said in the beginning, this is part of a strategy to ensure that we have appropriate services that can meet people with the needs of people with complex needs. So this is the first step in our journey to ensure that we have those appropriate services in county.
Okay, thanks for that. Does that answer, you want to come back on that at all, David?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think that we probably, look, I'm going to support this. That's not an issue because it's the right thing to do. But we perhaps should have had a paragraph in the paper articulating why the focus had been brought to bear on East Cambs as the first place to put one of these facilities in. Because it jumps to East Cambs without explaining the thinking process behind it. But that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bates, welcome back, and you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's very windy here, and you do need electricity to run computers. So, just an apology to all of you. I'm now back on. I have read this paper, and I think Councillor Jenkins has actually hit the nail on the head. This is the right decision. I'm happy to not participate much anymore now, but just apologise.
Okay, no problem. Councillor Bowden, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I should apologise, given that this is my first meeting. Probably the appropriate thing for me to do would be to stay silent and listen to the wisdom from all the long-standing members of the committee, rather than necessarily giving my opinion at this point. However, I was very disappointed with this paper, and I think that it's worthwhile my explaining my disappointment for the benefit of other members of the committee and for officers. The first thing I'd like to say is that the basic principle behind this, which is from Adults Committee, about the appropriateness and savings which are involved in bringing this sort of service in county, is irrefutable, and I fully support that principle, but that's not really the business of this committee. As Councillor Jenkins said, our business is the release of this particular plot of land, or potentially some alternative piece of plot of land. And it was Councillor Rogers who said that this whole paper is rather lacking in financial detail. And when we're looking at something from a commercial and investment point of view, especially from a property point of view, you do expect to see, or I expect to see, more financial detail of the choices which are made than we see here. The first thing which, to be quite honest, I'm going to put no more strongly, that disappointed me very strongly indeed, was the decision that has been made to restrict ourselves to a very small area of the county in seeking the land for this particular development on the basis of the requirements of one individual. So a scheme which will serve a number of people over a long period of time is being determined by the very short-term needs of one individual. And I'm not sure that that is appropriate decision-making, to be quite honest. And the reason that I have a fear about it does come down to the costs which are involved. Because quite clearly for the whole scheme, the land costs are a considerable concern and are a determining factor. And there are parts of the county, particularly in the north of the county, where land costs are much lower than they are in somewhere like Burwell. And I'm just concerned that a decision has been made on short-term grounds for one individual, which actually wouldn't be appropriate for the scheme as a whole in the long term. I'll put that to one side because that decision has been made, but I do have to express my concern about that. But looking at this from a purely property point of view, what I felt was lacking and what I would have liked to have seen, even if in a confidential appendix, was more detail about the costs and alternatives involved. For example, we are told that the site has a market value of about £650,000. We're told that could be higher with planning permission. We're told that there are costs which are involved with decontamination and demolition. We're not given any alternative. We're not given, first of all, a total opportunity cost so far as this is concerned, as far as the council's finances are concerned. But neither are we given any indication as to the costs of any alternatives which there may have been. We're merely told that there was some soft market testing which took place with developers and that an examination took place of available land elsewhere in this restricted area. And I find A, the lack of understanding of the opportunity cost of this, and B, the lack of an evaluation, of financial evaluation of the alternatives, I find that to be troubling. Now, as I said, I fully support the principle of this, and given how far this has got, I'm not going to oppose this motion. But I am very concerned. There are obviously problems with the ECDC objections which exist. I'm not going to go into the details of the actual site itself, but I really would have liked more numerics, more quantification of the opportunity cost which is involved in this, and of the costs which would have been involved in the alternatives which could have been considered. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that, Chris. Amanda, do you want to come back on that, or do you want to take that as good heeded advice moving forward?
I will do. I'll take that away. Thank you.
Yeah, I think as a point of principle here, it's something that I've discussed a time or two here. What we're looking for in reports is concise and accuracy. Length of reports can sometimes go on a little bit too long with not necessarily information that members particularly see. And in this particular case, I think it's a decent report, but it's just missing the conciseness and the accuracy of the figures that people have raised here. So, having said all of that, there's no other raised hands, and I sense that we're all largely in favour of this. Could you just raise a hand if you are not in support of accepting this? Okay, well, with that permission then, Dawn, with your agreement on that, I can take that through as a unanimous majority vote in favour of the recommendations. Okay, thank you, everybody. And thank you very much for that, Amanda. Okay, if we can move forward now, can I invite Cheryl French for item 6, the Programme Director, to introduce this report. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsack. So, yeah, this is quite a long report, unfortunately following on from your comments, Councillor Goldsack. But government legislated for net zero last year, so net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And Council in February this year also included one of its 4th corporate objectives to deliver against that target. Some of you might also remember that last year we signed up to UK 100's 100% net zero, no, 100% clean energy for our communities by 2050. So we have a strong policy position for trying to work out how we move forward and achieve net zero. It's not an easy journey to get to net zero by 2050. There is 30 years, but to decarbonise the whole of our existing homes or our stock of homes is going to be a significant challenge. We have more than 10,000 homes and businesses and schools on oil in Cambridgeshire. And what we're really looking for is how do we take them off oil and how do we get them onto renewables and how do we get them onto clean energy? And how do we make that pay and what are the new business models that we need to develop to do that? Now, we've been fortunate with this project, so the Swaff and Pryor project, because we were approached by the community. So the community have effectively, back in December 2017, came to us and said, we'd like to decarbonise our village. So the Swaff and Pryor Community Land Trust had already won monies to be able to undertake a high-level feasibility in their village to determine what were the different options for a community-scale heat project to take the community off the existing dependency of oil and onto something else. So since that time, we have been collaborating over the last 2 or 3 years with an expert team of legal, technical and financial advisors. And I think you'll see those listed in Appendix B. As a result of that work and a lot of phases of applying for grants from government to be able to help the development of the project, we're now at the point where we've managed to get an outline business case to share with you, a commercial structure which will effectively support the development of the project to move forward, that we can also share with you the work that we've been doing on the technical side. And I'm hoping to just take you through 3 quick things. The first one is 2.1, I suppose the strategic purpose of why we were doing this and what has shaped this project. So when we were working with the community as a partnership to get a design for a project moving forward, we wanted to try and see if we could get to 100% carbon reduction for the heating and hot water. We also wanted to try and see if we could achieve no cost barrier for anybody in a village. So there are significant differences in a village on the ability to pay. And currently, finance incentives are probably easier for those who have the ability to pay on a capital project upfront. But one of the things, if you're looking at a community scheme, is how do you manage that for everybody? So a key thing was how can we get people into the project without having a £10,000 or £15,000 cost upfront. The third part was that we need to incentivise the community to want to do this. And so we want to be able to provide something which is a better price than oil. The fourth thing, and I think this is a really important point, was that this project is something that we want to replicate. Perhaps it will be different in different communities, but actually there are many parts of a project which you can learn from and replicate. And what we want to be very clear in this project is that you provide a very good customer service and a good performance of a project so that the village of Swaff and Pryor will be talking about it as advocates when we come out the other side. And so it's important to try and see how we can ensure the performance of the project is managed carefully. And then the fifth part was really about saying, actually, we are moving into a world of net zero carbon, collaborations with the community on how to do this. And this project has given us an experience with the community that has helped us find both new business models and governance models. And I think that's important. So I'd like to take you onto the diagram, which is on page 42 in front of you. So this is diagram 1. And I'm just scrolling down myself onto the diagram, because this will help me explain the project succinctly. So in front of you, on the right-hand side, we have got the County Council logo, which basically says an in-house energy centre. So the council has the powers under the 1976 Local Government Act to generate, distribute and sell heat to our electorate, or to our customers, or to our residents. So Cambridgeshire County Council can develop an energy project on its land, and in this case we are looking to put a ground source heat pump on Goodwin Farm, and an air source heat pump, a thermal store and an education centre, and that is the element that will generate the renewable heat. To be able to pay for that, we will be looking to get sales from customers. So this is the residents in the village who will sign up. And at the moment, we have about 166 residents, just over half, that have said they are keen to sign up from the outset. And we will be selling the energy to them. So that's part of the income stream. We will also be looking to apply to Ofgem, so the Office for Electricity and Gas, for marketing, and this will effectively provide the renewable heat incentive. And one of the key risks that I've highlighted later on in the report is around the renewable heat incentive, but it's also an income stream for the project. And then the third key area of income that I wanted to highlight for the in-house centre, which is on the right-hand side, is that the project will be reducing carbon emissions at source and stopping them. So potentially across the project, there'll be about 47,000 tonnes of carbon emissions, which will be reduced over 40 years. So one of the things that we are currently doing some work with CUSPI, so the research programme with Cambridge University, is to design a mechanism for businesses to invest in community infrastructure in Cambridgeshire to be able to start moving more projects like this, so that we can start delivering more projects like this, using investment from businesses to help us on that journey. So that's the right-hand side of the diagram. On the left-hand side, it says pipe company. So this is the district heating network that will run throughout the village, connected to the energy centre and also to the homes that are signing up. Now, we have to set this up as a separate company to ensure that we can get grants in from government to pay for part of that pipe network, and also be in a position of no state aid. So what will support the costs or the income on this side of the project is we will look to charge a service charge to the energy centre. We will look to work with fibre optic companies so that we can put in full fibre broadband in the trenches that we're going to dig throughout the village, so that the village will also hopefully get a better fibre service. And we will also be, and we have put in an expression of interest for community infrastructure levy from East Cambridgeshire District Council. So that describes the commercial structure that we're trying to promote from the project. The only other thing I just wanted to add was that there are some significant risks that we are going to be managing as we move forward. Two of them I want to highlight. One is around the renewable heat incentive. The government is stopping the renewable heat incentive at the end of March next year, so the 31st of March. There are a number of, there is legislation currently being developed by government on how that will apply during the next 24 months. It's important for us to have conversations with governments at this point before we go forward into an investment decision, just how we manage accessing that renewable heat incentive while we're also trying to deliver the construction of the project at a time where there are some challenges with COVID and some of the impacts from COVID-19. The other issue that I really wanted to highlight was clearly we have support from the community. We've got 166 sign-ups currently, but we will be looking to increase that over the next 5 years to somewhere like 90%. With COVID at the moment, trying to get all the sign-ups happening before we start the project will be a challenge, and that's partly because accessing the community while we're all working virtually is a slightly different experience when you're trying to get individuals to sign heat supply agreements over the next few months. But we will be working on ways to manage that. We've also included a risk register at the end of the paper, which you've probably had a good look through to identify some of the key risks that we're managing. So from a resident's view, so just in conclusion, from a resident's view, signing up to this, what will happen for you is that your oil boiler will be taken out of your home. Your oil tank, which is in your garden, will be removed. A new heat interface unit will be put into your home, which is much smaller than your oil boiler. And you will be signing up to a heat supply agreement, and you will be billed for the heat that you use. So we are hoping that on balance that looks like a good offer to the community. And from discussions with the Swaffham Prior Community Land Trust and the work we've done in the community, we feel confident with current sign-ups and extending that to 90% over the next 5 years. So that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Cheryl. It's obviously a very exciting project, and there are a lot of details involved. So yeah, as I'm not surprised to see there's a few hands raised. So Linda, you got in there first. So Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you. Well, we've been following this for quite a long time, and the paper has grown, obviously, as the risks have grown, as the challenges and the complexity has grown. But it is a very helpful, particularly very helpful risk register at the end. Could I just raise the issue about the RHI ending on the 30th of March next in 2021? Because it seems to me there could have been, and I think there have been, issues in relation to COVID-19, in relation to moving work forward, but also in relation to perhaps signing more residents up. There may also be issues at the government end in terms of prioritising. And I wondered whether there was a possibility that window might not close so early, which is one, obviously a positive note. But on the negative side, I wondered how far the coronavirus outbreak had actually set us back. Obviously that's not reflected in the risk register because it's something happened that in very recent days. But could you just give us a sense of what you think the impact has been, is likely to be, and then what you think the risk is around that closure date not being met?
Okay, so yes, I've also got Chris who might be able to help me on a couple of more technical details on the RHI. So the project is looking to deliver a ground source heat pump and an air source heat pump as part of the Energy Centre. Now, our understanding currently of the arrangements to the end of the RHI period is that if you can pre-register for RHI, what you need to have is a planning consent and an investment decision. So on our current timetable, we are looking to get that completed somewhere by November this year, October, November this year. So that will allow us to pre-register for the RHI, and then it'll give us just over a year to be able to deliver the construction project, which works for the ground source heat pump. The challenge in there is we also have an air source heat pump, and the current advice or decision is that you have to install an air source heat pump by March next year, which is 2021, and to access the RHI, you also have to have it commissioned. Now, that isn't what we want to try and find out is what does that mean in terms of detail, because we won't have the whole project completed at that point. So that's the risk that we need to try and manage. Chris, as in Chris Parkin, was there anything you thought would be worth adding to that?
No, I think you covered that very well. Just a couple of minor points. If people are looking at government publications around the RHI and flexibility in response to COVID-19, there is mention by government of extending tariff guarantees for those who already hold them. So the tariff guarantee is the pre-registration process that Cheryl referred to. So if you already have some flexibility to lock into a certain RHI tariff under a tariff guarantee, they've extended the time window for you to commission under that. That's not applicable for our projects because we don't currently hold a tariff guarantee. And this issue about air source heat pumps, that again is related to the tariff guarantee. So tariff guarantees are available for larger installations of ground source heat pumps, water source heat pumps, biomass and biomethane, but not for air source heat pumps. So we have, as Cheryl very well summarised very well, the opportunity, provided we get planning consent and financial investment decision by the end of March 2021, we can get a tariff guarantee that gives us another 12 months to do the commissioning of ground source heat pump projects.
So, Linda, was there anything else that we missed in your question?
No, I don't think. I think that's fine. I'm happy with that. I notice you've amended the risk register, which I'm really pleased about, because I was really alarmed earlier on about the borehole issue. But I think you have closed that now. So I'm more comfortable about that.
Thank you, Linda. Councillor Bowden, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I am very interested in this scheme. Until I saw this paper, I didn't realise that we were still progressing with it, and it had taken so long since this has been talked about for such a long period of time. And the basic principle behind it of moving towards some form of more renewable energy makes an enormous amount of sense, but is not economically viable at this time without subsidy. The time will come in the future, I believe, when schemes such as this will be economically viable without subsidy, but we are where we are at the moment, and it's laudable that we take advantage of the opportunities that exist at the moment, so long as those subsidies are realised. If those subsidies are not realised, then it does place us in a much more difficult position. And I do have a concern about the viability of this in financial terms if the renewable heat incentive issues, which have been mentioned by Cheryl, aren't sorted out satisfactorily. And I gather from the report that the 50% of capital investment from HNIP grant funding for the distribution network and for the heat interface, has merely been applied for and hasn't yet been received. I also note the prospective receipt of income from the selling of carbon credits, and that obviously is quite uncertain in terms of its reliability, although it may end up being more successful than is currently being budgeted for. It really is very uncertain indeed. And my concern about this is that, especially so far as the availability of the subsidies are concerned, that they may not materialise, and therefore this scheme becomes undeliverable as far as we're concerned. And I would like some idea from Cheryl about just how likely it is that the HNIP grant funding, which was, if I remember correctly, more than £2 million on the capital side, just how likely is it that that will be successful? And at what point do we believe that we will know about the renewable heat incentive problems, which were mentioned before, being able to be overcome? Unlike the last paper, I revelled in this paper because so many numbers were within it, and it was possible to do a lot of calculations, and I found that really useful and really helpful. But one comment which was made in here concerning risk, which I didn't agree with, was concerning the short-term effects of COVID-19, and particularly the lower oil prices that we've got at the moment. And I don't believe that the current lower oil price is a relevant consideration, because that is a temporary effect, I'm sure, of COVID-19. It takes some time to be overcome, but it's relatively short term. And in the longer term, given the likely price and availability of oil, I don't think that the current artificially low price of oil should be a deterrent in considering moving forward with this scheme. But as I say, my main concerns about that, which are deterrents as far as I'm concerned, is the likelihood, is the reliability of the subsidies.
You want to come back on that then, Cheryl?
Yes, I mean, the first thing I'd like to say is I'm pleased you picked up on the point of the finances, Chris, in the paper. And I have to just say, Johnny Treyer has done an amazing job on pulling the finances for this project together, and also the application that we submitted to the Heat Network Investment Project. So what is the likelihood of us getting the grant, the 2.08 million? I feel very positive that we will be getting that grant, and I hope to hear very soon. So let's move forward on the basis that that is going to be positive and that we can be looking at the full value of it. In terms of the RHI, I think you're right to have some concern here. And so one of the recommendations on the front of the paper is to see if we can set up a roundtable meeting with ministers and our local MPs and you as politicians to have a conversation about the complexity of delivering retrofits into villages is quite different to delivering a district heating scheme into a new development. And I think the nuance of how that works and how it happens needs to be explained to ministers so that they can see that you've had the work that you've undertaken over the last 3 years and the benefit that it can potentially bring in terms of how we share the model, especially the thing around carbon credits, especially around how the community again have provided the intelligence into this project. I think it will, that round table, and what I understand from experts in HNIP, that they are seeing a whole number of projects which are at this point now seeing the RHI deadline coming forward and are in a difficult position to make an investment decision. So I think there'll be an appetite for a discussion. So in terms of moving forward, we're not looking for an investment decision from you on the 5.2 million until October, November. We will need to ensure that we've had that discussion on the round table with ministers ahead of that, and we've got clarity on the RHI and the income stream, so we can be reporting to you what that looks like in terms of impact on the IRR. Johnny, was there anything you wanted to add to that? Okay, no. Was that okay, Chris?
I'm very happy with your responses. Thank you very much indeed. Although we do have to bear in mind the danger that if you come back with a report which is less than positive, it may affect the evaluation that this committee should have in terms of going ahead with this scheme. And I just would like your confirmation that really the short-term lower oil price should not be deemed by us to be a deterrent in valuing this project and in determining whether we go forward.
I agree. I agree with you on that issue. I think perhaps I didn't quite phrase that well enough, because what I was trying to express was that it's a short-term issue. The thing it might impact at this very moment is if you are a resident who wants to just get your best deal, getting a current price of 20 pence a litre on oil might deter you from signing up right now. You'll come back in a year's time when that price changes. So hopefully that explains where I was trying to come from on that.
Thank you, Cheryl. Very comprehensive answers there. Thank you for the questions, Chris. Next, we've got Peter Mcdonald.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Cheryl, two things really. Just coming back to the business case and the oil price. Although Councillor Bowden's absolutely right, we can't take a spot price and base the business case on that, of course, because it's a long-term project. I checked this morning on the oil futures prices, and even the 5-year price from now is only $10 a barrel up from where we are at the moment, $32 a barrel. So I think we should just be mindful of that. Of course, if we all here could predict the price of oil in 5 years' time, we'd be living on our Caribbean islands. So we don't know that. So it's a word of just a word of caution. This may not be a short-term factor. It may actually go on for some time. That was the first point to be mindful of. And secondly, presumably with the lower oil prices, although they're current, and I'm probably teaching my grandmother to suck eggs, but presumably we can renegotiate the capital costs, can we not, on the basis of a lower oil price? Because the capital providers at the end of the day are building something, would build something for us, based on a certain payback. I think it's 17 years in the paper. Do we have the ability to negotiate that, or is that already in tablets of stone?
Okay, so there's two issues. One was about the long-term oil price. I think the only sort of challenge I think on oil prices is where we go as a country in terms of a carbon price and how that would be applied. And so I think quite recently I read that the Committee for Climate Change is going to be putting a paper to government around carbon prices. So I accept that there might be a longer term view currently that the price of oil in 5 years' time might be lower than it is today, but we don't know where carbon is going to go in terms of pricing. So your second point was about whether we could negotiate on lower costs for construction. I don't think that's going to impact. In fact, I think the bigger challenge we've got is just negotiating while, depending on our exchange rate, the price of our money, how much that is going to be able to buy in terms of the goods and products that we need to support this project. That is one of the risks that we're looking to manage. And so the equipment that we're looking to secure, some of it has got a longer lead time as a result of COVID. And we're going to have to just try and keep a close eye on the supply chain to understand when it will be good to purchase, accepting that we're not going to be making an investment decision until October, November, and how we manage that could be quite a tricky challenge. And one of the technical discussions that has been happening was, how do we look to maximize our purchasing powers over the next year to be fleet of foot to gain the benefits or purchase equipment at better prices over the next year to be able to support the construction.
Okay, thank you for coming back on that, Cheryl. Just a quick point on that before I go on to Councillor Rogers, who's the last hand on, and we'll draw a close to it on that one. Just a quick point on that. It's interesting to have a view on the future pricing of capital and everything like that. But I think you kind of proved, Cheryl, with the level of report and the level of detail in the report, just how in control of that aspect of things that you are moving forward. So I feel very comfortable with that personally. Just want to say that in relation to what we've read in the report. Terry, Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Mark. Like Chris, I share his misgivings and issues that he raised. But Cheryl, if I may congratulate you and your troops, you've certainly done your homework for today. Very much appreciated. However, just one point, you say at the moment 116 of the residents are giving you their support, but you're looking for 90%. What is the break-even number that you're looking for?
Okay, so we've currently got 166
166. Sorry, I wrote down 116 for some reason. I do apologise.
That's okay. And so Johnny might be able to give a bit more depth, but we've modelled the finances based on a 50% uptake from the start. increasing over time with the view to getting to 90% uptake after 5 years. Johnny, did you want to add anything onto that?
Just to say that we've not actually modelled a break-even figure in terms of the uptake from residents. We're assuming an additional 10% uptake per year in years 2 to 5 to get up to the 90%. But that's certainly some analysis that we can do quite easily to come up with that figure for you.
Thank you for that. Just one final point, if I may, Chair. I'm glad to see we are talking to ministers. We do have members of Parliament, and I think we should make them earn their mettle for a change, and let's get on to them and give us their support. This is a pathfinder project, and I want to see it be successful.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just in conclusion on that then, of course, moving forward on this, it might we might want to have a look at this project with review to the new committee of environmental and sustainability, or whether this remains 100% a commercial project. But that's something again that we can adjust as we move along. So there's quite a long list here, everybody, of what we're going to. I'm just going to read out the report recommendations. But having done that, if anybody's sorry, Councillor Rogers, could you remove your raised hand?
I'm having a problem with my system at the moment. I've lost half of the screen and I've lost the mute button for some reason. I'm just trying to look at it.
For you, so that's okay for now. Thank you very much. Yeah, so what I was going to say is I'm going to read out the report recommendations, but I don't think I'm sensing any objections to this for a need to go to a vote, but I will read them out anyway. A, note progress to date with the development of the project. Approve further commercialisation of the outline business case as set out in section 2.2. Approve the proposed commercial structure for the project. Delegate to the Chief Finance Officer in discussion with committee chair signing of the Heat Networks Investment Project HNIP contract if the council is awarded grant for commercialisation and construction of the heat network. Approve Boyds Energies and Service Solutions Limited as the design, build and operate and maintain contractor. Note the application of the Department for Transport for Street Works Code powers. Progress a roundtable discussion on the renewable heat incentive with business, energy and industrial strategy and the Office of Gas Electrical Markets involving MPs and ministers on the Swaffham Prior Community Heat Project. And finally, note the key risks and in particular COVID-19 risks, the importance of this project. Is there anybody that's got any objections? If not, I think I'm going to propose that this once again, Dawn, is carried unanimously. Okay, we will do that. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Cheryl, for an exemplar report there. Really well done.
Thank you.
Right, we're going to move on then to item 7. If I can invite Cherie to bring forward this one, please, as the project manager.
Thank you.
The minor works for St Ives Smart Energy Grid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So a bit of background for the new members of the committee. First of all, the Smart Energy Grid is an innovative solar and battery storage project that's been under development for the St Ives Park and Ride. The project requires grant funding before the council can give the green light for the full construction program. The paper outlines progress to date on several conditions required before a funding agreement will be offered. As we have not yet met all of those conditions, the paper therefore requests approval for minor works to commence before the 6th of July this year, so as to invoke our planning permission prior to expiration. I'd like to provide an update on a few of the conditions since the paper was submitted. In terms of the land title registration, the access rights issue over the unadopted portion of Meadow Lane have been resolved, thanks mostly to the efforts of Michaela and Cheryl on the call. Therefore, the application to the land registry may be submitted once all the signatures are in place. In order to mitigate delays to securing and registering the land title, the council made an offer to MHCLG, which is the body who will provide the grant funding, to underwrite the risk on the title. That offer has been rejected. However, as we'll be in a position to reapply to the land registry shortly, this action is no longer required. On the power purchase agreements, these are the agreements to purchase electricity from the scheme. There have been positive conversations with both customers over the last few weeks. The second memorandum of understanding is yet to be secured. However, the energy manager for the site is keen to participate. This takes me to the main purpose of the paper, which is to seek approval for minor works to begin on site so as to retain our planning permission. I've laid out 3 options. Option 1 is building a single non-operational carport, including the solar modules. Option 2 is a single carport foundation only. And option 3 is a carport plus the battery storage compound. The preferred option is option 2, the construction of the single carport foundation. This is the lowest cost option at £20,000 and would result in the least disruption to users of the carport or surrounding residents. It's a key concern to me that the work can be completed safely. Bouygues will develop risk assessments and method statements ahead of all on-site work, which shall align with current government guidelines and Bouygues' own safeguarding procedure. Workers on site will receive daily inductions on safe working practices and will comply with social distancing guidelines from government. I shared Bouygues' procedures with our health and safety premises and security advisor, Phil Hill, and he confirms that they're consistent with county guidance. And I'll just close with a few words on the risks included in the appendix. These are risks related to the project as a whole, not the decision at hand. In fact, by approving minor works today, it's mitigating a risk that could present significant costs and delays. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
You were muted, Mark.
My mute got confused with my outside telephone ringing. My fault. We've got a couple of questions there. Thank you very much for that, Cherie. Councillor Bowden, Chris, if you could lead, please.
Thank you very much indeed. I read this paper with interest, and I have to say a little bit of concern, which has been partly assuaged by the report we've just been, the verbal report we've just been given. But on the land title registration, the comment is made that there may be conditions when the land titles are reviewed, which may interfere with the smart energy grid. Now, I don't have the background knowledge of this about just how many land titles we're talking about and what sort of background work has been done. But when we're talking about conditions which may interfere with the smart energy grid, are we talking about things such as easements or development restrictions, or are we talking about something else? And I'm really surprised that we should be getting this far in a project without having done this sort of work. And we're told it's normal practice ahead of funding being provided. Maybe I'm not understanding it properly. So may we have more clarification on what potential conditions there may be which may interfere with the smart energy grid when the land titles are reviewed. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Councillor. These are not existing conditions on the land titles. These are conditions that the land registry may apply during the registration process. So they are unknown to us at this point. However, I am assured that any conditions would be placed only in consultation and agreement with the council.
So, Chairman, may I just ask what sort of conditions are we talking about that the land registry would apply? I don't claim to be an expert on property law by any means, but I really don't understand what the land registry may apply and why.
And frankly, I don't think they will be placing any conditions on. It is an administrative step that MHCLG, the funding body, will be taking. And it's a process that simply needs to play out before they're satisfied in providing us the funding agreement. Actually, I'm not sure if Michaela on the call would be able to elaborate any further.
Yes, so we have an outstanding registration at the moment. We are aware of one restriction on the title, which we have dealt with. So what we need to do is for the land registry to register that in Cambridgeshire County Council's name, and then we can produce those land titles to MHCLG. What MHCLG have not gone into detail as to what, when they receive those titles, what they would class as a non-negotiable for them in respect of any restrictions, conditions on those titles. So as far as we're aware, the restriction that is on the title has been dealt with, but that's for MHCLG thereafter to make that determination as to whether they will provide us with the grant based on any other conditions on the title.
Kevin, if I just may, just for my benefit, What sort of restrictions are you talking about which we've so far experienced? Are you talking about something like an easement or a development restriction?
The restriction at the moment on the title was a use restriction based on its former use as a quarry.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, all right, thank you. You're now happy with that answer, Chris, yeah? Thank you very much. Okay, move on. Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm entirely happy with accepting the recommendation of option 2, by the way. Okay, this particular project, I know the site very well. I know the landowners quite well. I know the potential customers quite well. So I think this is very common sense to actually, I was going to volunteer to take my sledgehammer down to the site if they want. Okay, but I think I'll let other people do that, and I'm quite happy to accept the recommendations and look forward to coming up. Just one question really, which is actually, I know we are having discussions about possible customers, and I'd be interested to know at some point as we go forward, not necessarily today, as to how those are going and that we've got customers on board. Happy to accept the recommendations, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ian. I don't think there's anything to come back on there, is there? So I think we can move that forward. Cheryl, you've got your blue hand up. Do you want to come in on this? Can you unmute, Cheryl? There you go.
Sorry, I wanted to come in on the land title, but it's all been sorted, so I just need to take my button off. Sorry.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Well, there's no more blue hands raising, so I think. Once again, I think we're sensing that we probably don't need to go to the vote on this, and everybody's keen to get it moving forward. If anybody thinks different, if you could just press your blue hand and raise it now. Otherwise, what we're looking at doing here is we're asking to note the progress of the report, approve the commencement of minor works to implement the carport foundations on site before the expiration of the planning permission on the 6th of July. And we looks as if very much once again making this easy for you, Dawn, that we can move this forward unanimously with a majority, with a vote. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cherie. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move this now on to item 8, and I think as we discussed this earlier, Councillor Jenkins, you've declared an interest in this, but you're entitled to stay on, and we're entitled to look at your garden shed at the same time. So thank you for that. With this then, I'll invite Chris Parkin, the Energy Projects Manager, to come and introduce this report for Comberton Village College Low Carbon Heat Network and other school heat pump projects.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So the Council's Climate Change and Environment Strategy Action Plan commits us to replacing heating systems in our own buildings and end-of-life heating systems in maintained schools with low-carbon heating systems.
Sorry, Chris, can I just stop you there? Sorry.
Sure.
Just for commonality and for the fact that we are live on YouTube as well, do you have a camera facility that you can engage?
It is engaged. It's saying, it's giving me the stop video option, but it is saying that I'm using the integrated webcam. I have had problems with the webcam on my laptop, so I fear it may be a...
Well, okay, for the fear of closing down there, we'll continue because we can all, I believe we can all hear you loud and clear, but you're in a very dark room at this moment in time. Black square on the screen, but okay, we'll carry on, Chris, and maybe that's something we can think of moving forward for future meetings.
Okay, thank you. I do apologise about that.
Mark, it's Terry.
Yes, Terry.
I've just had a power failure and I've just logged back in. I hope you can hear me. Is that all right?
Yes, you're clear, loud and clear.
Thank you.
Okay, so the Energy Investment Unit is at various stages of working on energy efficiency projects with 3 academy schools, Comberton Village College, Impington Village College and the Galford Primary School. And our energy performance contractor, Bouygues, has identified that there's an opportunity at these schools at Comberton to almost entirely decarbonise the site's heating by implementing a large ground source heat pump project with an on-site heat network. And at Impington and the Galford, opportunities to make substantial reductions in the carbon emissions from the heating at the schools, also by implementing ground source heat pumps on those sites. These projects would require a new contractual model with the schools. So normally we provide a lease on equipment, an operating lease on equipment to academy schools. But in this case, because this is equipment that you can't readily recover at the end of a lease term, so boreholes, heat networks, ground loops, none of those are recoverable items, we need a new contractual model. And as Cheryl's already discussed on the Swaffham Prior project, that would take the form of a heat purchase agreement where the schools entered into an agreement with us to purchase heat from us for 20 years, and we would retain ownership and operation of the heat pumps on the sites. The projects have paybacks of 15 to 19 years. So really the emphasis of these is more about decarbonisation opportunity, but a decarbonisation opportunity that at least pays for itself and generates a very small amount of return, rather than being an opportunity to generate a significant net revenue for the council. However, as with Swaffham Prior, those paybacks on these projects are dependent on securing planning consent and a final investment decision by the 31st of March 2021 in order to capture government support in the form of the renewable heat incentive. There's also the commissioning window that's been mentioned previously, so we'd have 12 months after financial close on the projects in order to commission the projects. So up until potentially 31st of March 2022. That's less of a challenging timeline than securing the planning consent and the final investment decision by 31st of March next year. So that's the really challenging part of the timeline that we're looking at. If we failed to meet those timelines, then the projects would not be able to proceed without there being a significant net cost to them. In order to achieve the timelines to have planning consent secured and a final investment decision made before the end of March next year, we would need to commence work now on project design work and on commissioning planning studies, and that would imply the County Council taking on board the costs of those activities at its own risk. The paper is asking is requesting permission to draw down a development budget of £213,000 for the purpose of those projects, developing those 3 projects, and also to develop a heat purchase agreement to use with academy schools and to seek the confirmation from the Education and Skills Funding Agency that it's acceptable for academies to enter into a long-term financial agreement of that type. The report sets out some of the details for the Combatant project. So the initial modelling on that suggests a capital cost of £2.4 million, payback in 19 years, and that it would reduce the carbon emissions from the site's heating by 95%. At the time of writing, I didn't have the initial modelling results for the 2 other projects. I do have that now, so I will give a verbal update on it. I should caveat the numbers I'm about to quote that we've only just received those numbers very, very recently, so they've not been fully QA'd as yet. But for Impington, the initial estimates are a £1.4 million capital cost, payback in 17 years, and a 34% reduction in the carbon emissions from the site's heating. For the Galfred, capital costs would be £776,000, although Education Capital have agreed to provide a £300,000 contribution towards that, which comes from an existing condition improvement agreement that they have with the Academy Trust. Once that £300,000 contribution is accounted for in the business case, that brings the payback to 15 years, and the carbon reduction for that site would be 53%. One thing that I did want to emphasise is that there is more risk in these projects than in other energy projects that we normally have in our portfolio, particularly the ones with schools. And that's due to the combination of very tight timescales for securing the RHI. These are the first ground source heat pump projects that we've done within the schools programme, and we haven't done any on our own buildings either. So there's some risk attached with unfamiliarity. And obviously success of the projects is dependent on external decisions from planning, from the Education and Skills Funding Agency and the relevant academy trusts. So there is potential that we may in the coming months find that some of the projects no longer look viable and have to return to the committee and update them on that and say that certain projects no longer look deliverable and the work should be suspended on those. In that event, the development costs would effectively be sunk costs. However, on the other side of the argument, in the absence of taking forward development of these projects, we know that the heating at Impington and the Galford would be replaced with new gas boilers. And at Comberton, where they have a very large number of plant rooms, some of which have reached the end of their life, others haven't yet. The end-of-life boilers would most likely be replaced with oil-fired boilers, as it's an off-gas grid community, and those are the cheapest options for the school in terms of meeting their ongoing heating needs. It's highly likely that those boilers would still be operating and emitting carbon in 20 years' time, possibly beyond. Just to give an idea of boiler lifetimes, the boilers currently installed at the Galford vary between 25 and 27 years old, so they can have very, very long operational lifetimes. If the committee do agree to the development budget for these projects, we will provide a fortnightly update to the Energy Investment Programme member working group or by email to keep them informed of progress and ongoing viability of the projects. Obviously, I guess there may be a change following changes in committees and committee structures to that working group, but if there's a successor group, it will be provided to the successor group rather than that group. And finally, there was just one point where I wanted to update some of the information that's provided in the report. So Appendix 1 provides the high-level programme timescales for these projects. And we have, since the report was circulated, had the opportunity to engage with a heat pump expert that Bouygues have brought on board for these projects. He's done some review of the timelines and he's recommended that the commissioning element of the timeline, so during the delivery phase, needs to be a couple of months longer. So that takes completion of the projects through to January 2022, still giving us 2 months leeway ahead of the deadline for final commissioning. I think that was everything I wanted to say by way of an introduction. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Chris. And we have got a few points raised here. Chris, Councillor Bowden, you've got your hand up, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I was a little bit puzzled by this report, and my puzzlement is whether this committee is actually the appropriate one this report should have gone to. The reason being that from a financial perspective, what we're being asked to do effectively is to risk more than a couple of £100,000 of development costs on a scheme, which may or may not end up being, as was just said, sunk if the scheme doesn't go ahead. But if the scheme does go ahead, the outcome of it from a financial point of view is effectively to have no increase in the net present value of the sites concerned and of the operations concerned. So from a purely financial point of view, even with all of the national discounts and subsidies which are available, there is very little point in going ahead with this. Now, the argument which is put forward is one to do with decarbonisation. Now, whether it's really appropriate for this committee to make a decision about the value or otherwise of this element of risk for the amount of decarbonisation which will happen or not, I'm not sure really should fall within our remit. And it might well be that Josh's new committee is the more appropriate one where this sort of issue should be taken. But from a financial point of view, I'm really puzzled that it should come to us for consideration.
Okay, I'm going to use the colloquial officers here. Has anybody got a comment on that?
Chairman, oh, sorry, go. I'll let Cheryl go.
Okay, so to date, we've been coming to the Commercial and Investment Committee for the schools programme, and I think that's why it's coming here. I can see the rationale for it moving in the future to the Environment and Sustainability Committee. I think one of the challenges we have is a timeline problem now, is that to deliver, we're on a tight timeline. Now, Josh might be able to help out here, but there is a committee on Thursday next week, which is the Environment and Sustainability Committee. I don't know if there's an option that this could go to that committee instead for a decision, or whether we need to take a decision here and accept that the next stage goes through to the Environment and Sustainability Committee.
I'm going to make a suggestion there that we actually do, because it has resided in this committee. It continues to reside in this committee until the new one is established after next week, and then we move it forward. Otherwise, I think we're at risk of stalling the project. Personally, that would be my view. I think that's kind of if that fits with what you were intimating there, Cheryl. I think that would be the right thing to do.
Mark, it's Terry. May
on that subject, you can come in.
May I butt in here?
Yes, please.
I mean, if the committee next week and it goes through that committee to decide, there will be an expenditure involved with that. Who authorises that expenditure? That's the big question, because that will fall back quite remarkably. We're talking of £2.5 million. That's a question we would have to ask ourselves. So I think coming to this committee at the moment is the correct direction.
I think in all of these cases, the way I view committees is a little bit like the Olympic rings and a Venn diagram. You know, whilst they are circular in terms of what they control, there are crossover points at which are shared between committees, and I think this is a good example of one. Linda, I can see you've got.
Can I come back on that, please?
Sorry, can I just come in here, because I mean, there are two comments to make. One is this committee has been the committee that's dealing with it. The other committee has not yet met. This committee has got the experience, and that's the first point to make. So moving it precipitately, I think, would be unwise. The second point to make is that actually, as Councillor Rogers has said, this committee is about making investments, and that's what we're being asked to do here. That's the major recommendation that we're being asked to sign up to. And so I think this committee will continue to be involved. My understanding is that it will have to continue to be involved in energy projects insofar as they're requiring investment from the county council.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Chris, back to you. You want to come back on that?
Yes, I have no problem with this going through as it is at the moment. I see the time scale which is involved, and I understand the crossover in terms of committees. However, it's a case of where should the risk be held within the council so far as this or this type of project is concerned. Should it be held in this committee, or should it be held in Josh's new committee? And in my opinion, when there isn't a financial return that we are talking about, but we are talking about a return in terms of decarbonisation, then the risk should be held by Josh's committee, not by this committee. And that's a really important point, which I would just ask members and officers to give some consideration to as time goes on.
Okay, thanks for that. I think we'll do. Right, just a couple of bits of order here. Linda, you've got your blue hand up. Was that because you had another question as well? I think you're still on mute, Linda. Okay, do I take it from there? Okay, the blue hand's gone. And okay, that leaves one blue hand up, which is actually Tony Cooper. Tony, do you want to raise something at this point? Tony, are you still on mute? We can't hear you. Sorry, Democratic Service. Can anybody hear Tony? I'm not hearing him speak. Okay. Try again now, Tony. No, you're not. I can see your lips moving, but I can't actually hear anything. Democratic Services, can anybody help with this, please?
We'll try, but he's unmuted, so there's not a lot we can do, really.
I think it's a connection issue rather than a.
Mark, can we key in? Can he key in his comment so we can read it?
That's a good suggestion. I'm assuming, Tony, as long as it's not War and Peace, you could use the chat facility to put your comment in. Okay. Meanwhile, if I can, whilst Tony's looking to do that, and rather than delaying any further, could we move to Councillor Bates, who's got his hand raised, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was just, I think Chris Mellion is on the call, and I think it would be just useful for Chris to really reassure members that this committee is being asked, I think, to agree a budget for development, which is laid out in the recommendations. Understand what might happen in the future about the involvement in the other committee, but as far as I can see, that is what we are being asked to do today, which is actually set a budget for development. And I think that's the right, we are in the right place.
Yeah.
This is a commercial and investment panel. That is a commercial decision, but would value the Deputy Chief Executive's advice on this matter.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, I mean, I did try and come in at the start, which Cheryl got there just before me, but I was only going to an extent, echo all the comments that have been made thus far. Clearly, the evolution of the new committee will need to embed, and we'll need to set out the roles, responsibilities in more detail from an operational perspective, and the budgets appertaining to those activities. So it is absolutely right at this point that this committee take this decision. If further down the line it's deemed appropriate for, to use Councillor Bowden's commentary, the risks associated with this investment to be part of the Environmental Committee, then we will completely via both the capital budgets and the revenue budgets at that point in time. It's not difficult. It's just the timing of this particular paper and the timing of the establishment of the new committee haven't particularly well synergized. But no, so I think it's totally appropriate for this committee to take the decision at this point.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but I think what we could perhaps do, Chris, is get a note out to members of this committee moving forward as to, my Venn diagram idea as to exactly what sits in the middle here and what goes to the left and what goes to the right. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Jim. Okay, thank you very much then. Okay, well, in this particular situation, I've now got Tony Cooper as on chat, but it's not that long, so I just will read it out to make sure that was added to the debate. And Tony says, an observation: construction and building infrastructure projects are assessed through whole life cycle carbon assessment, which would inform future decisions of this type. The RICS and other bodies have established methodologies. I think that applied to a little bit earlier, but yeah, thanks for that, Tony. Thanks for typing that in. So moving on there then, we find the right bit here now. Carport and Village College of the Small, I apologise. We are looking to approve a development budget of 213,406 for a low carbon heat network project at Carport and Village College, and for smaller heat pump projects at Impington Village College and the Galford School. And B, the development of the model heat purchase agreement for use with academies and confirming the acceptability of this with the Education and Skills Funding Association. Again, I don't think I'm sensing any need to go to the vote here. Perhaps you could just click your blue hand now if you would not be supporting this motion. This report, sorry. Thank you very much then. In that case, once again, Dawn, you've got an easy ride today. That's also a unanimous vote. Thank you very much for bringing that forward, Chris. Thanks for your patience on the technology issues there as well. Okay, we're moving on for you. We've got a little bit more. Just a note to everybody involved in this. This is obviously live screened, and I myself have taken the opportunity while sitting at home to probably consume a little bit more liquid than I would do had we been sitting in a meeting room. So if anybody would like a 2 to 3 minute comfort break, I think it's probably now is the right time just to do that. And literally, guys, I've got it. I'm never quite sure what the exact time is here because I've got 2 clocks in my room. I've got it. Is it 11:56 or is it 11:52?
It's 11:56, Chairman.
11:56. Then, if I can literally say, can we restart this as close to 12 as we possibly can, please? And just have a very quick comfort break, okay?
Thank you, Chair. Much appreciated.
Okay, we're just clicking up to noon again. So if you could re-engage the live on webcast, that would be great. I think that's now done. Some of your expressions have changed. That's nice to see. I think, are most people back in the room? I think we are. Right, okay. Thank you, everybody. Item 9 is the COVID-19 update. Officers have been asked to bring a report on COVID-19 response to date for those services for which each policy and services committee is responsible. Given the rapidly changing situation and need to provide the committee and public with the most up-to-date information possible, I've accepted this as a late report on the following grounds. Reason for lateness: to allow the report to contain the most up-to-date information. Reason for urgency: to enable the committee to be briefed on the current situation in relation to the council's response to COVID for those services for which it is responsible. Members, please could I highlight that the appendix to this report is confidential as it includes commercial data. If you would like to ask questions or comment on information in the appendix, could you please not refer to specific data, or we need, sorry, so that we do not need to go into a confidential session. I think that's basically understood. If anybody's got a problem with that, please let us know. Otherwise, I would like to, I've lost my page again now. Sorry, I think it's Chloe that's bringing this forward. Chloe, are you there?
Thank you, Chair. It's actually me, Amanda Askham.
Apologies, Amanda.
That's no problem. So thank you very much. I'll introduce the report, talk about some of the impacts, and then I'll hand over to Chris, Deputy Chief Executive, to cover the financial section. So as members will be aware, we're providing an update on activity related to coronavirus and the impacts which are relevant to each service committee every month. So this reflects an overview of the activity going on across the council, a lot of which is still focused on response to the emergency, and then it goes into the particular impacts that are relevant to this committee. So directors receive new guidance almost daily, and we work hard to turn that guidance into operational activity. And you'll see that in the overview section, the most recent pieces of guidance that we're responding to are around issues on opening up schools, funding to care homes, and track and trace. Updates on all of these activities will be shared in the relevant committees this month and will be cross-referenced in GPC at the end of the month. So this report is really about the things that are relevant here and is split into a number of sections. So the investment portfolio, which is across property and multi-class credit. You'll see from the report that we're projecting a reduction in rental income across the property portfolio of just over £1 million. Half of this is from Brunswick House, and the rest of the detail is in the confidential appendix. And Chris may want to talk further about some of the property investments when it comes to his section. It also talks about the delay in making multi-class credit investments, and the committee will be aware that we were intending to make this investment from the 1st of April, but we've paused to review the approach and projections in light of market changes driven by the current global pandemic. So in your appendix, you'll see a projection on changes to the investment scheduling in that and the likely financial impact. The report then goes on to talk about areas where we're supporting commercial activity in response to COVID-19. So managing the property estate and planning for safe reopening when appropriate, working with supply chain commissioners and contract managers on new procurement guidance, and our input and support to the economic recovery subgroup, which is across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and led by the Combined Authority and the Mayor. Lastly, the report goes on to cover activity that we're trying to keep going as much as we can as planned. So CAMS 2020, energy schemes, we're progressing everything that we can do on those. And areas where we need to develop new responses. So particularly around our income generating services, where we need to have a look at marketplace such as schools marketplace and see if the business plans need changes in response to the current impacts. I'm happy to answer any questions on those sections. I'm just going to hand over to Chris to cover the financial section before we do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda, and through you, Chair. Can I? I'm just worried that my network has been behaving itself for the last 4 hours, and suddenly, as I get up to speak, it's saying my bandwidth is low. So if I'm sounding a bit slurry, I do apologise, and if need, I'm getting a shake of the head from Amanda, which is good. Excellent. I won't repeat the bits that Amanda has highlighted. Obviously, the report does set out the implications in relation to certain activities that are the responsibility of this committee. And as Amanda has highlighted, we are taking a similar report to each service committee. It won't come as any surprise to members of this committee that in the scale of other areas, the impact of COVID-19 is not that significant. I know it's still, obviously, the numbers are still slightly scary, but in terms of the overall position for the council, which is looking at additional costs well in excess of £40 million, the numbers associated with this committee are relatively small in compared to those around the social care in particular. Having said that, obviously, it's still as important to make sure that we focus on deriving as much income from our commercial investments as we can under the circumstances. And Amanda sort of highlighted a number of the issues and initiatives that we're doing to look after our money and look after our supply chains. Oh, now I'm getting feedback in my system. So I'm not sure whether you're actually receiving me at all now.
We're still receiving you just about. I think we can hear enough for you to continue, Chris.
If it's okay with you, Chairman, can I just turn my video off, and that might help our relatively around the social care in particular. Having said that, obviously, thank you. I'm struggling to hear you now, Chairman. Sure, Chair, I'm struggling to hear you now, Chair. That might improve a little. I will continue, and if I'm lost completely, perhaps you could just give me a visual annotation to that effect. So just come back to the overall numbers for this committee. They are set out in the report in paragraph 4, and as with other committees, we have segregated the financial consequences or financial implications resulting from COVID-19 into 3 constituent parts, which are new commitments, i.e. additional new expenditure that we're having to incur, income foregone, and impaired savings, i.e. savings that we can't deliver directly as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. So in total for this committee, the overall financial implications as we sit here today, and obviously as Amanda highlighted, these are changing and being reviewed on a regular basis, is just over £2.2 million. The vast majority of that, as you might expect, is in relation to our commercial portfolio, and the detail of that £1.5 million is actually set out in the appendix to which you have referred, which is obviously in a confidential appendix, and I'm not going to go through that in any detail, but happy to take any questions outside of the meeting should members wish. A very small amount of additional costs associated with new commitments, and that is set out in paragraph 4.3, particularly around the cleansing of buildings to make them operationally safer for our staff. But I think just in terms of an overall picture, Chairman, we are looking to try and support supply chains. We are looking to support our tenants. But we are doing it on a bespoke basis, on an individual basis. So it's in our interest to make sure that our tenants and our supply chains do come through this COVID-19 effectively and robustly as they can do, in order that at some point in time we can return to business as usual, and those tenants and supply chains aren't lost to us forever. So. So we're looking at things on a bespoke basis, but I'm happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Amanda, thank you, Chris. I think it's only right at this point just to add, and this is not from me personally, this will be from, I'm sure, all of the committee, our thanks and everything for everything that everybody's done during the last few weeks. I know there was quite a lot of this gone on Tuesday, but I think it's only fair and right, having just gone through that report, for the work that officers have been putting in. With regards to moving this forward, we've got one hand raised at the moment. Councillor Bowden. Chris.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. First of all, I very much welcome this report. I don't welcome the numbers involved, I don't welcome the picture it's painting, but I do welcome the fact that officers are on top of the matters as far as they can be in a very fast changing environment, and that we are being given the information which we are being given. So congratulations to officers for doing that, and I think it's extremely helpful to us, although I think we all know the uncertainties surrounding the assumptions which have been made in here, and therefore the numbers which are in here. I had a particular question, and I don't know if it's possible for it to be answered in public session, and if it's not, I wouldn't want to go into private session, about paragraph 3.1.2 and Brunswick House. Now, I don't know as much as many members of this committee about Brunswick House, but I did note that the assumption which is being made in these figures is that new bookings from September will continue or will start under normal terms and conditions. And I wondered if the move, which I understand is taking place in at least part of the university, towards having remote lectures next year is likely to, or is thought likely to, impact upon that assumption which is being made about the utilisation of Brunswick House from September.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden, and through you, Chair. I'm happy to answer that one, because this isn't one of the sort of commercially sensitive elements of that appendix, because this is not a private limited company. It's an asset that we actually own, as opposed to being one of our tenants. I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, the drafting in the report was written prior to some of the announcements that came out this week from the universities, Cambridge universities in particular, as you quite rightly say, Councillor Bowden, who have expressed an alternative solution to delivery of lectures next year. A significant proportion of our tenants or our students in Brunswick House are from overseas, and I think that's a particular market that's going, particularly if they change the way that the provision is going to be provided, will impact. So the long and short of the response to your question is, the narrative in the report was prior to the announcement recently. We will have to review that. We don't yet understand what the full implications on this investment are going to be for the new academic year.
I mean, just as a point, before we leave that, I also read that article with interest, but actually there wasn't a lot of detail in the article other than the headlines that they're going to go to web-based seminars. So I don't think we in the university really know what that means yet. And whether they're still going to be here using other facilities and aspects. So yeah, I think it's the right thing to do, Chris. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Jenkins, David, you're up next.
Yeah, yeah. My understanding of the Brunswick House issue and Cambridge University, and of course I may be totally wrong as well, is that yes, lectures are going online, but they did say that tutor group type activity would continue as per normal, which would imply the students are going to be here. But who knows? Let's get some proper clarification. I have one question, please, and a continuing grumble. In 352, we talk about an income loss between 3 and 4 million, and that's not the same as the income loss reported in 4.3. Probably an easy explanation for that. I'm sure Chris will give it to me. And then my grumble is, again, 361 gives a link to the indicator, a link to the reports, which are published weekly. And the last one is the 27th of April. There's been at least 2 since. For convenience, can't we have them all there? Or since they're going to be out of date, not have any of them?
Chris, do you want to comment on that, or Amanda?
I can talk about the highlight reports question. So the process on the highlight reports is that they are included, the ones that are relevant to each committee are included in the body of the committee reports during the month. And then at the end of the month, we publish all the highlight reports for transparency as part of the final end of month GPC report. So the highlight reports are all embedded in the service committee updates are bang up to date. We publish 48 hours before each service committee. So the most up-to-date information is always in the service committee reports. And then we sort of round up the housekeeping by the end of month reports going in, published as one batch at the end of the month.
And Chairman, if I may pick up the other question, the reason for the difference is the number quoted in the narrative of the report includes all income across all committees. I think the references in the report is around on-street parking, etc. So that there is a plethora of income outside of the roles and responsibilities of this committee, whereas the table is actually just the areas for which this committee is responsible. Apologies if that's caused any confusion.
Okay.
I thought that would be the rationale, Chris, but in the text in 4.3, it does say income foregone, pay and display car parking. So I start to think, well, maybe they should be including all of us. Of it.
Sorry, Councillor Jenkins, I realise you haven't finished there, so apologies. So the pay and display income relates to the income from Shire Hall, which is the only car park that we actually, off-street car park, which we run. The highways income is the on-street parking, which is within highways and infrastructure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we've got Peter Mcdonald. Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's just a quick observation and suggestion, which may well be taken into account by the officers anyway. I know that in South Cambs, we're having quite a lot of discussion about creating a dashboard for the economic recovery. Obviously, there's a lot of historical data available, but it's a very fast-moving situation, as you mentioned. So it was just a plea to the officers that from that economic recovery subgroup, that we can start within this committee at some stage to look at some kind of a dashboard around the recovery. I think it will help us in making decisions.
Okay. Do you want to comment on that, Amanda?
Yeah, I was just going to say that Chloe Rickard, the commercial transformation manager, is our representative on that economic subgroup, and we'll bring back the information of that, and we'll start reporting consistently across the system. So yeah, absolutely, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, David, I think your blue hand's remaining from last time rather than another question. If that's correct, if you could take the blue hand off, thank you very much, as I thought. Okay. So we were asked to note the content of this report. I think we can move on, having duly noted, and thank you to the officers for bringing that forward. We're moving on to item 10, the committee agenda plan, training plans and appointments to outside bodies, groups and panels. Dawn, are there any updates on the agenda plan or training plan to report?
Thank you, Chairman. There are a number that have come up throughout the meeting. This Land confidential report that's now going to the June committee. Property services update now going to September committee, and the decision on Swaff and Prior is coming back to either October or November later in the year anyway. On the training plan, members have probably just got correspondence about a training session on investment that's probably going to take place at 2 o'clock on the 19th of June and not the 5th of June as set out in the appendix to the report.
Okay, thank you for that, Dawn. Would any members of the committee wishing to ask a question make a comment now? Didn't think there would be. Can I just add on that if you look at the outside bodies, groups and panels, they're still showing councillors Hay and Schumann in most of the positions. That's something that will be worked up in the forthcoming days, and likely to see the names Goldsack and Bowden replaced in there accordingly. But we will have a look at that and then move that forward. Is that okay?
Chairman, can I just comment on that point, please? Because it's only been a few days since the full council last full council meeting, it's been a bit last minute. Could I propose that we have a better report going to the June committee of all the outside bodies once groups have had a chance to consider their nominations And I believe there's a few extra ones need to be added on, which were previously coming under GPC, but I think they're probably more appropriate for commercial and investment.
Well, I think that's the right thing to do. Personally, I don't think we need to go to the vote on that necessarily. I think if everybody's happy, we can bring that forward to the June meeting, and then each group has had their chance to put their impact on them. So again, we were asked to review the agenda plan, review the training plan, agree the appointments. We've just discussed that. I don't see any objections to that. We will take those recommendations as carried. I think we're just there. So as I announced,
excuse me.
I apologise, Councillor Jenkins. David,
I do beg your pardon. There is this Appendix 3 appointment of the Listland Board of Directors. Is that included now, or is that a later point on the agenda?
Chairman, if I may, if we, rather than agree all the appointments in appendices 3 and 4, if we defer them till the next meeting, because I think for Appendix 3 particularly, we've got this land item going to the next meeting, and that will feed into that possibly. And also the same with Appendix 4, groups will have had chances to consider their nominations.
Okay, I hadn't fully appreciated that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, as I announced at the start of the meeting, the library acquisition item has been deferred until a later date. So that was our final item. I would like to express our thanks to those members of the public and press who have taken time to watch this meeting this morning via the Council's website. The broadcast will now end. The committee is due to meet on the 19th of June, and arrangements for this meeting will be confirmed nearer the time in the light of the emerging situation. I thank you for all your participation today, members and officers, and wish you safe travels onwards until we meet again. Thank you very much.